everybody. Hello. Welcome. Vandana's words from this morning are still going around my head, and especially about the need of understanding farming as a caring practice, and a need that is becoming more and more present now with climate change upon us. And of course, less than 30% of the land that is classified as agricultural land, officially at least, can effectively be farmed. The remaining 70% is only utilizable by highly specialized groups and through the mediation of livestock. And in fact, the variability, the climatic variability of these areas is so structurally high that only traditional pastoral systems have the knowledge, the livestock, and the institutional infrastructure to be able to make effective use of these areas and turn this variability into a resource for livelihoods and for the market. So, this is humanity's herding heritage. Welcome to the session. And my name is Saverio Krätli. I am a researcher of pastoralism, especially at the interface between policy, science, and people, with a focus on pastoralism in the context of international and economic development. And here, the panelists are Iglesias González, Zuriñe, Iglesias González, Hanwant Singh, and Ilse Köhler-Rollefson. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for coming to this session. And now I would maybe give the word to Zuriñe to introduce herself, and then if everybody does the same, and we start the panel in this way. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Saverio. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm a shepherdess, biologist, and rural facilitator from Spain. I identify myself with a 25-year-old woman that works as a seasonal shepherd without animals on property. I studied biology for my degree, and then I realized that agroecology is so important, no? But I was lacking kind of a more practical approach. And then I jumped into practice through a shepherding school in Spain, and then I learned how to extensively shepherd goats. I also, when I finished this, I jumped into a transhumance project in Spain, and
a transhumance project, you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then last year I was working in the Alps in Italy, so I'm moving around a little bit.
Thank you, Zuriñe. Hanwant?
Namaste. My name is Hanwant Singh Rathore. My organization name is Lokhit Pashupalak Sansthan. I working with the pastoralists last 30 years, and I also have camels, and we are working in Rajasthan, in India, very close from the Pakistan border, and we start several projects for the pastoralists in our countries. We talk about later.
Ilse.
I'm Ilse Köhler-Rollefson. I'm a veterinarian by training, but I kind of left veterinary medicine behind me and also academia. I love animals, that's why I studied veterinary medicine, but I got really concerned with the professional work. And I ended up in India doing research on camels, and that kind of, it changed my life. And I co-founded the League for Pastoral Peoples, which is an international advocacy organization for people who depend on herding. And I'm also co-founder of Camel Charisma, which is India's first dedicated camel dairy, together with Hanwant Singh.
And of course, you are the author of Offspring on the Land, which is a newly published book, and it's marvelous, I think. Would you like to tell us why did you write it?
Yeah, okay. Yes, so I wrote it for two reasons. Basically, I mean, there's so much controversy about livestock. And there are some people who are saying that by 2030 or 2040, livestock should be eliminated from the earth, and that keeping livestock is the most destructive technology on earth. This is totally untrue. And I wrote the book basically to make people understand that by sourcing their products from livestock that is responsibly kept in tune with the environment, you actually do a better service for the environment and for humanity than if you just go for highly processed, corporatized vegan products. So that was one point. And the other point is that I want to show what I've learned in the last 30 years about the fact that there are alternative animal-based cultures out in the world which are massively important for the future of our planet and for the future of humanity. And you find these herding cultures basically almost everywhere in the world. And you know, they keep animals ranging from alpacas to yaks. So they include people in Latin America keeping New World camelids. They include the Maasai in Kenya who keep cattle, yak keepers in the Himalayas, camel keepers, two-hump and one-hump camel keepers, and even reindeer herders. Can you put the next slide, please? No? And actually, you find these people over a much larger proportion of the world than you find settled crop cultivating farmers. Because only 1/3 of what is classified as agricultural land can be used for crop cultivation. The remaining 2/3 can only be used for keeping livestock. And as you see on this map here, so we have the reindeer herders in the north, we have yak keepers in the Himalayas, we have two-hump camel keepers in the Gobi, we have buffalo nomads in India, and in Pakistan we have much of Africa can only be used by means of cattle, sheep, and goat. And in Latin America, you have the New World camelids. And so they manage a huge part of the Earth's surface. They are much more prominent than settled farmers. Settled farmers only manage about a small proportion. The areas that are arable in the world actually are, very few. Next, please. And what has fascinated me about the pastoralists is that they have, we go back, they have a very intimate relationship with their animals. They treat them as members of the household, as members of the family. They care for them, and they're a total antithesis to the kind of industrial livestock keeping that is promoted by animal science as being more efficient and better for the environment and having lesser greenhouse gas emissions. So this is what really is the fascinating thing. So there are alternatives out there in dealing with animals. And I mean, that's part of the story. Next, please. And what all these people have in common is that they move with their animals either over long distances for hundreds of kilometers or just over short distances. And they operate basically without fencing. So they move through the landscape, people and animals together. Sometimes it's only one herder, or sometimes it's a whole family. And you can imagine that you can't move, with a herd of 50 camels through the landscape unless you have a really close dialogue and relationship with them. And so ecologically, what they do is incredibly important because they transform waste. Vegetation, that it's not just about grass. Here in Europe, we're always talking about grass-raised livestock. Here, it's shrubs, it's trees, it's lichen, it's thistles, it's vines, anything they eat, and they directly convert that biodiversity into human nutrition. So there is not that stage that we have in between with crop cultivation that we first eliminate the native biodiversity and then we put in our seeds and our sides in order to protect that monoculture. And the other thing is it's only powered by solar energy. There's no fossil fuels involved. And it's also incredibly protein and efficient. It's the most efficient way of generating protein for human nutrition. And one important statistic is the fact that in the intensive industrial systems like you have in the US, livestock is actually fed twice as much protein as you get out of the livestock. Whereas in countries like Kenya and Ethiopia, where all the production is pastoralist, you get 10 times as much protein out of the livestock than you actually feed them. And what they also do, they're very often integrated with crop cultivation. And for instance, in India, they are totally essential for maintaining soil fertility. So we have this integration between herders and farmers. The farmers pay the herders to have their animals stay on their land overnight. You can see here, this picture on the left is from Karnataka in central India. So the farmer is paying the herder to keep his sheep there. And actually, the manure is the biggest source of income for a lot of the pastoralists. And on the right, you see, this is from our area in Rajasthan, where the camels graze on the fallow fields, which are overgrown. They become overgrown with weeds, with thistles, which the farmers hate. They absolutely hate these thistles. And then the camel herds come in, they eat the thistles, they convert them into really delicious, sweet milk, and at the same time they provide manure, all with fossil fuels. Next, please. And, well, basically, I mean, the essence is that animals were made to move. And we have kind of reverted that system. I mean, we now immobilize our livestock behind some closed walls, and then we grow the feed somewhere else, maybe in Brazil or in the United States, and then we ship it to Vietnam, China, and other places, and we believe that this is efficient. It's definitely not. We have to once go back to make the animals move, to go to the plants and eat them. I mean, that's a basic biological truth.
Thank you, Ilse. Now, I have been working on pastoralists for over 20 years, and to be honest, it started completely by accident. What about you? How did you get interested in pastoralism?
Well, yeah, so as I mentioned, I studied veterinary medicine because I love animals, and I thought this is the right thing to do. And then, I don't know, I wasn't really suited for small animals, and the farming was already going, I mean, I was only doing artificial insemination of cows, and I didn't find that satisfying. And I had a love for horses. Actually, I was very keen on racing, thoroughbred racing. And I went to the thoroughbred farm in Kentucky as an intern after I finished my studies, and I saw how these animals were raised, you know, when they're even only 2 years old, and the veterinarians were actually conniving with that system, raising these 2-year-old horses on painkillers. And then when they were 2 years old, after the season, they were finished. So I had a total identity crisis. I didn't know what to do. I got interested in archaeology. I went to Jordan as a volunteer on an archaeological dig. I had knowledge of anatomy. I could identify all the animal bones that the archaeologists were digging up and interpret them. about past economy and ecology. So I loved archaeology. I did that for 10 years, and then I thought, no, it's time to work with living animals again. And I had the opportunity first to work in Sudan, and then I got a fellowship in India, and I came to get to know the Raika community, which is a Hindu caste whose identity is based on their relationship with the camel. They actually believe they were created by Lord Shiva to take care of the camels. And I was very fortunate. I met Mr. Singh. He helped me a lot in getting to know the community and a better understanding everything. Now it's your turn.
Yeah, so...
The other slides.
Do we have to the next one?
Yeah, we have.
What am I supposed to do? This one? No?
No, it's a different presentation.
How do I move to the next one?
They are on it.
They're working on it. You want to talk about the project with camels, I believe.
Actually,
And here it is.
They are, yeah.
Saying the word camels made it appear on screen.
actually, when 30 years before, I don't know much about camels. But when we have worked together with Ilse, and before my grandfather, he keeping camels, I know that that time I'm like 5 or 6 years old. I play with camels, and mostly he keeping male camel, and he provide camel for the robber. That time we have many robbers in Rajasthan, so he provide camel and that camel is very strong camel, and they riding every day like 100 to 200 kilometers. And when just after 30 years, I totally fall in love with camels. And I tried, then we have like camel breeders called Raika communities. They keeping sheep, goat, camels, and cattle also. They are totally landless people. They are pastoralist people. Before we called nomadic people, but now they semi-nomadic people. And people they love with camel like as a family member. Every camel have name. Every camel have branding, village branding, like that. Next. And they keeping like sheep and goat also. And sometimes they going like, they have two type of the people. They have long distance migration, like 1500 kilometer or 2000 kilometer they going. And when have rainy season, they come back. And over animal, they decide where they going for grazing and which season, what they eat. So totally they depend, not depend on herder. They have own way where they go. Next. So we have, when they going for a long distance migration, they use camel for the keeping some luggage or everything for children and a small baby. And when they have like 8 months they going to the long distance migration. And where they staying, the farmer, they call them every 10 days before they call them. They said after 10 days you sit over a farm in agricultural land. And they staying like 2 or 3 days, and they have more than 3,000 to 5,000 sheep. And the farmer, they in 2 or 3 days he get lot of manure from the sheep. So farmer, they also happy, and the farmer, they provide some money and also food. And they are over our sheep, and they also not staying like more than 2 or 3 days there. Then they move from there. Next. So we have, in our areas, we have very close to the wildlife sanctuary. There our camel, they going for grazing. Now we have big problem of now government bring some tiger there. We are totally against of tiger. We have tiger in Rajasthan, but our organization, we advocate for the fight for the rights. Next. So like a camel breeder, they love to them like the same like children or family member. When I start milk marketing 1995, they totally ignored. They said, no, we are not selling. We sell camel milk like sell our children. So totally they are against. But now this totally situation is changed because camel population declined more than 60 or 70%. One time we have 1.5 million camels now in Rajasthan. Now we have government figure is 200,000 camels, but we said 150,000 camels left. So next. And we talk about that our camel breeder, I learned from them. They have a lot of traditional knowledge and other things. So they said we have 36 different type of plant which the camel eat. So all plant we make some research and we make some books. All plant is Ayurvedic plant, so it's good for the milk. So she also mentioned about that camel, they moving one place to other place, and we are not keeping like a farm camels. That they need move one place to the other place every day 10 to 15 kilometers. So they need like moving. If you keep them like in farm, is not success like camel breeding or camel also milk also not good. So we have our camel milk. We have our camel milk is totally cruelty-free camel milk. We give to half milk to the baby, and we are not separate to them. First we bring a calf to the mother. They suck like 2 teeth, and 2 teeth we give enough only one time, but they are give 3 times to the milk, but we are milking only 1 time for sell camel milk. So we have camel milk like like same like cappuccino, or like we have big, and you know that we have especially when we have some people and our pastoralists, when they're going migration, they don't have any pot or something, so they use like ack leaf. So they're milking and they drink in ack leaf. Ack leaf is good for the stomach. So they have traditionally knowledge we get from pastoralists. Next one. Now in 2015 we start camel milk dairy in first time in India. So we're making camel milk cheese. We have camel milk soap. Camel milk also going for the autistic children, even cancer for camel milk and urine. Also we make some camel poo paper. So we have lot of many product we make because camel breeder, they need some money. Now it's totally change of the government policy. In 2014, government of Rajasthan, they decide camel a state animal. We are happy, state animal, so the government do something, but it's nothing. In 2015, they totally ban of the camel from Rajasthan to other state. So our camel price also gone down. Like when we have before, we have 40 to 70,000 rupees. And after that law, we have like 3,000 rupees or 500 rupees only. So we fight like that. Next one.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hanwant. Thank you very much. Of course, as we have seen, herding heritage is a global phenomenon. And it's not just a practice of strange, exotic or faraway places. There's plenty of it in Europe, in Germany, in the north of the UK, in France, of course, in Italy, and of course in Spain. Now, you mentioned the Transhumance project. Mm-hmm. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about it, and why did you embark in it, and what was the objective, and according to you, the added value?
Of course. In Spain, there was a long tradition of herding and transhumance, which is the seasonal movement of animals depending on the pasture availability. But it was mainly abandoned through the second half of last century because we are suffering of a intense rural depopulation, right? So this project in Spain was trying to recover this transhumance practices, and they were offering a kind of position for young people to start learning. And that's how my colleague Celia and me, my colleague Celia and me ended up in the Montaña Palentina in Spain, herding a herd of 1,000 sheep. Unfortunately, the sheep came by truck.
1,000?
1,000, yeah. Yeah. Sheep behave better than goats, I have to say.
Still.
And yeah, unfortunately, they came by truck because in Spain we have a national system of drove roads that are public and protected since many centuries ago, but it's very hard to go as they do in India, no? For 1,000 kilometers through these roads. And not many people are remaining. So, yeah, Celia and me went there, met, and you can pass, and discovered the Montaña Palentina. You can also pass one more. Yeah, some pictures. Yeah,
yes, that's okay.
Yeah, yeah. Some pictures of it. And, well, the thing is not only the environmental or landscape management that animals do, but also it's an economic and social input to many rural areas. It was really, it was really intense when we arrived to the village down in this mountain, and they told us, wow, it was 20 years that nobody came as transhumant people, no? And they were astonished that 2 young women were there at the middle of the mountain without a mobile signal or this kind of things, no? And yeah, and well, it was a beautiful mountain. There are others more difficult to shepherd, but it was nice. And then at some point we decided, Celia and me, that we needed to spread the word. We needed to tell people, yes, we are young women, and yes, we are deciding to be shepherdess. And the way we thought it was nice to connect with other young people was through the social media. So we created a little project which is called Pastoras Nómadas, Zagala y Rabadana. And yeah, and we started almost 1 year ago to publish some of our experiences, but also some of the research that has been done, because we studied also, and we try to be the bridge between academy, practitioners, policymakers, and so on, no? Because we consider that there is a big gap between all these things. And yeah, and then...
Oh, thank you, thank you. You mentioned a range of considerable benefits of this kind of herding. And yet, despite of the benefits, it seems very much that pastoralism continues to be kind of neglected and not really known and treated as one would expect. Ilse, do you have a comment on it, I believe?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is several factors involved. So one of them is basically it's the fear of the settled people, of nomads. I mean, that's been there historically. That's why the Chinese built the Great Wall to protect themselves from invading nomads. And nomads also have historically been, sometimes they have inflicted damage or so on settled people. So I think this is a deeply ingrained fear of people who are out there in remote areas and they can't be controlled. So that's been there for thousands of years. But I think it was then deepened in colonial times when, for instance, I'm saying the British now, you know, the British are in, you know, you live in a temperate area, and then the British came to India, and they had this vision in their mind of an orderly farm surrounded by a fence, and they were trying to implement that there too. And they were very upset with the nomads because they couldn't control them. I mean, they couldn't tax them because they didn't have any land in their name. So they actually declared many pastoralist communities as criminal tribes. And so this happened not only in India, but also in Kenya, in many other countries. And it definitely wasn't just the British. I mean, the Chinese have the same ideas. In Iran, the Shah was very much against the nomads, which were traditionally, I think, composed the majority of Iran's population because it's a totally arid area. And then after, when the colonial area stopped, then people from those colonized countries, they were sent to study agriculture at maybe one of these land-grant universities in the US or so, where these concepts of animal science, of this reductionist approach of looking at an animal not just in the context of the landscape and the environment, but just looking at it as a kind of an input-output machine. You know, you see how much feed you put in, and then you see how much milk and meat you get out. So the academics in the colonized countries, or I don't like to use that word, developing countries, I mean, they were trained in that mold that was created by sedentary people who lived in temperate environments where it's possible actually to keep animals, you know, not moving all the time. So, and so all the bureaucrats in the, you know, departments of animal husbandry or so in India and in Kenya or so, they're all trained in that Western model of animal science. And yeah, I have actually a big bone with animal science because that reductionist approach of looking animals only as a source of greenhouse gas emissions and defining livestock sustainability actually as emitting as few greenhouse gases as possible. So it's you know, it's a number of factors that are coming together, historically, colonial, and then animal science. But it's changing, yeah.
It's changing, it's changing.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Well, everything is always changing, but is it changing for the best?
I think more people are becoming aware. I mean, just look at the people who are here. So there is much more awareness now, I think, and realizing how important livestock is also for regenerating land and to take that approach. But I mean, we also have to realize that there's enormous corporate power structures who are against that. I mean, the same story that Vandana told this morning, and it also applies to the livestock sector, where the livestock genetics are controlled by, you know, just a minimal number of companies who also have their interest in the grains that are used to, they are closely connected with the feed companies, with the pharmaceutical companies who earn from these, you know, the industrial systems where you can keep livestock only if at the same time you give them antibiotics and so on. So it's a big complex. And unfortunately, a lot of scientists have been kind of co-opted by that and believe this industrial livestock keeping is the most efficient, when it's clearly not.
And of course, there is a flourishing of shepherding schools in Europe, of all places. Whilst we are trying to persuade the pastoralists who are still practicing to stop, we are training our youth to do it. And quite a few young people are interested in these schools, and they are multiplying in numbers. And I believe there are quite a few in Spain.
Yeah, indeed. Like in Spain, we have counted 11 shepherding schools, even though not all of them are right now working. But yeah, I'm feeling that it's rising and it's creating a momentum, no? Where more and more people are become interested into not only livestock or extensive livestock, but also in coming back to the rural areas to live from the production and not only working online, no, from the rural areas. That is also a tendency. But yeah, I would like to ask, how many shepherds you know? You can raise your hand if you know any shepherd.
Oh, wow, a lot, yes.
Good, good. And how many of them are younger than 40 years old? Hey, well, not bad, not bad. Younger than 30?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's decreasing, but yeah, you see, no? In Spain, at least, we have a terrible problem of turnover, no? And yeah, it's nice with these shepherding schools, but then you become very excited because you share with a lot of people and you say, wow, yeah, this is possible, and then you finish and you want to start your productive project. Many people want to do it in a small scale, right? And then you jump into the real world and say, wow, it's very difficult to access to land, okay? It's very difficult to commercialize my products being small. Shit. Okay, let's see. Let's have a look on the Common Agricultural Policy. Yeah, I need to be at least, I have to have at least 500 sheep, but I want to be small. Yeah, maybe it's not an option. And then you say, what shall I do? What shall I do? Well, I don't have the solution.
Because you cannot start from 500. You have to start smaller, can't you?
Yeah, of course. You need to start smaller.
You can't just buy 500 sheep and then herd them.
And maybe, and I mean, there are people living out of much less heads of livestock in different countries, but also the Common Agricultural Policy is shaped by member state. But then, luckily, we are trying to coordinate between different people, no? And for example, in Spain, we have the platform of extensive livestock and pastoralism that is trying to fight for the rights of pastoralists and also more in the political and technical scene. But we also have a women livestock farming network, no? With only women supporting women making farming. Because many times when women, when they are farming, no, they are with the animals or they are at the farm, and someone comes and asks them, well, yeah, but where is the farmer? Nice to meet you. I am the farmer. No? So, yeah, we are trying also to fight for a recognition of women and also from keeping animals from a feminist point of view. We want to care for animals. We want to care for the humans that are taking care of the animals. We need to adapt the conditions, the lifestyle of farming to the 21st century. We need to rest. We want to go on holidays, maybe little ones, but we need it, no? And
this is very interesting because in the context in which I tend to work, which is in Africa, all narratives around the modernization of pastoralism construct the process as a way of getting out of pastoralism, not of making pastoralism more modern, based on the assumption that pastoralism is the past. So the modernization of the past is to move out of it. But I've had the impression you are talking of something a bit different. You are talking of using those skills and upgrading them, perhaps, or making them more possible, despite the now quite long tradition of obstacles that have been put in place.
Exactly. And
so what would it take for pastoralists to become an attractive livelihood option for young people?
Yeah, well, the working conditions, yeah, they are hard, but still we need to work on these little things that make it a bit easier. No, for example, well, I can't go on holidays if I don't have the money to pay someone else to do the job for me, right? So the lack of profitability is very strong, and this play with the common agricultural policy is not always good. So we need to come together also among the farmers to support each other. And for example, in France, they have an organization, and if I am sick or I need to do some bureaucratic stuff, I can call this organization, and they will co-finance, like publicly co-finance this position, no, for this day that I'm sick.
So, sorry, in practice then, you're talking of redirecting perhaps some of the significant subsidies that now are going to very large agribusiness, and redirect them to the small producers that who actually do not take the planet on the brink of extinction because of climate change.
And that they are struggling much more. No?
Right.
And for example, this little project of the social media, it's also a way of saying, well, we need to change the image of a shepherd. Shepherd is not that one that is the poor guy that was in the village. No. We want shepherds being stewards of the land. And we want more young people being part of this. But of course, we need to work on improving our rights and our conditions.
There is also,
He also mentioned.
Yeah, okay.
Actually, when last Corona's time, our Karaika communities, a lot of young people, they lost job. And they come back to the home, they don't have any job. So now community, they help them, every family, they give one sheep to and maybe they make herd like 100 or 50 camels or 50 sheep. And they get, they herding. And same, we have example like for young generation. We start camel milk marketing first time in India. We have people, they get every month, they get from milk 30 to 35,000 rupees per month. They don't have any expenditure. They have only expenditure. They bring milk to our dairy by motorbike. So they have little bit like 10% of the expenditure, other thing have. And they have, somebody's they start only from like two camels, now he have 50 camels. So he increased that. So young generation also have option, if have good income, then they keep continuously. Now we talk about that manure, like 10 years before the farmer, they are not buying any manure from the pastoralists, and they're very cheap price. They're buying only pesticide or chemicals or using like that. But now this Vandanaji, she also mentioned about that, but I also mentioned we have one train from Punjab to Bikaner, we call cancer train. The most of cancer patients, they come there. Because there are people, they using pesticide and for chemicals in agriculture. So most of people, they get cancer. But now it's over change in our areas, more farmer, they buying manure from pastoralists.
Thank you very much. We are coming close to our end. Not quite, but we have a few more minutes. Would you like to add something?
No, I just want to add something. No, it is really true. I mean, the pastoralists, like a dairy farmer, they never have any time off. I mean, 24 hours every day of the year, they have to go and herd their animals and walk out there. It's true. I mean, like the temperatures go above 40 degrees Celsius, and they become very cold also, and they still have to look after the animals. So it is a very demanding job, and it doesn't get, as you were saying, it doesn't get recognition. It's something that's done by people who are maybe too stupid to get a different job. Yeah. And what they actually should get is recognition as, I mean, they are the saviors. Also, they are much more important than the people who, these wildlife conservationists. Because actually, a lot of the pastoralist livestock, it coexists with with wildlife. And in our area, so we live next to this wildlife protection area, and there's a lot of leopards in there. And it's legally not allowed even to take the animals into the wildlife sanctuary. In practice, it is allowed by giving bribes to the forest officials. But it's a fact that the leopards mostly live off sheep and goat. That's their main diet. And the Raika, they accept that if it's within limits. I mean, they say the leopard also has to live. The leopard has got it in writing from God that he can eat one of our sheep occasionally. So there is that attitude of coexistence between the pastoralist livestock and the people and the wildlife. That is there. And so recently there was the CBD, the COP in Montreal, where this plan was approved to put 30% of the land under protection. And it happens to be that the land that most resembles nature is the one that is managed by pastoralists. And if it were that the pastors would be put in charge of managing that land that is to come under protection, I think that would be a perfect solution. Of course, it's not going to happen, but this is the way in which our thinking should go. And pastoralists, by producing food in tune with nature, they do so much for all of us without damaging the wildlife, while preserving biodiversity, and they need to get that recognition. They're the true heroes, in my opinion.
And it seems to me that you all mentioned in various ways and in attributing it to different contexts, but you all emphasized the interaction with the environment as essential to pastoral systems. And this strikes me as a very particular, because the interaction with the environment is, to a large extent, precisely what modern agriculture has strived to exclude from its model of production, considering it a problem, usually, a source of problems of limitation and so on, no? And try to shelter, using fossil fuel to shelter the production model from natural conditions, especially so when considered unpredictable, uncertain, with various results at the local level and fairly disastrous results at the global level. As of course, externalizing nature can be done only up to a certain point, and then by the time you do it at the global level, there is nowhere to externalize it, and so everything comes back and we have climate change. So perhaps this is also at the core of the misunderstanding of pastoralists, because this interaction with the environment is not visible by the framework, because it's assumed not to exist by the framework of livestock production, of animal production. No? And at the same time, perhaps it's something that pastoralism has in common with agroecology?
Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, the pastoralists...
What would you say about that? Is it relevant then to agroecology? And in which way is it relevant?
I mean, I think pastoralism is the top of agroecology in a way. I mean, as I was saying earlier, I mean, pastoralists, they manage to produce food in a systematic way without using any of those inputs, without taking out the native biodiversity. I mean, it's the perfect model. And unfortunately, there is some kind of a disconnect, actually. You know, I know the FAO has an agroecological network, but I don't know, pastoralism doesn't figure into it, nor do we, as members of that pastoralist advocacy group, really have connected with the agroecology. You know? So this is the problem, that we look at crops, plants, and animals, livestock separately. You know, they are experts for crops and they're experts for livestock, and they don't talk to each other. And that's really the problem. That we look at crops isolated from livestock, and we look at livestock isolated from the plants. We need to bring them back together, and I think that's a big thing on the agenda, is to reintegrate crops and livestock. And I think it's happening. I talked to somebody, yeah, here. No, it's going on actually in Britain. To read.
In a way, yeah, in a way, it's also, yeah, recovering traditional practices, right? Because before we were talking what they do in India, but in Spain also, like, the traditional way of doing trashumans was, okay, the south is very hot in the summer, so we bring the sheep and the goats up to the mountains during the summer where the pasture is fresh, and then when we go down at the end of the summer, then we go into the cereal fields that are already harvested, and then the sheep eat the leftovers and also give the manure back to the field. So it was an ancestral way of doing it. So it's also retaking, no? The old ways of doing, of farming, of living.
Yeah. So yeah, and I know that, I mean, regenerative grazing is the big word in the developed countries and among the audience here. No? But we in the pastoralism sector, we haven't made that link again. No? I mean, whereas, you know, we need to connect and get everybody under the same umbrella, the pastoralists and the regenerative graziers.
Sorry, the pastoralists and?
And the regenerative graziers. Ah. They go together. They're just two sides of the same coin.
Yes, of course. And whether this regeneration is within with the care for plants in the context of the natural conditions, or with the care for animals in the context of the natural conditions, yeah, which of course are not really separated.
But I mean, again, it all has to do with the soil. Right? I mean, livestock is so important for the microorganisms, for the insect lives and all these. Yeah, so.
There's a phrase in your book that you quote from the Mera Declaration. The Mera Declaration is a declaration produced in 2010, I believe, by a very large group of pastoralist women who gathered in the town of Mera in India, and after 3 or 4 days of discussions, produced this statement. And you refer to it and say they say that the best way to, what do they say?
The best thing we can do for the world is to stay pastoralist.
The best benefit they can give humanity is to continue to work as pastoralists. Yeah, yeah, indeed. Well, I would like to move to a conclusion on these words. And of course, there is you mentioned some expectation for improvement, and as part of this trend, which unfortunately is not the only trend, there are also trends going in the opposite direction. We should never forget that. But this is a good trend, and is the fact that a few years ago the Mongolian government applied with the United Nations for an international year of rangelands and pastoralism, and the process has gone through successfully, and now the year has been decided for 2026. So there is a rush to it, and a lot of activities are building up in connection with this objective, and hopefully it will lead to a better understanding of these systems. We have to be careful. In my experience, a lot of double speech, as Vandana was mentioning this morning, has been developed with certain considerable degree of skill in the last 10 years or so, also in the context of pastoral development. So there is a lot of talk about helping pastoralists by helping them to stop being pastoralists. And so all this is always to be taken with a pinch of salt. But this is not the case for the International Year of Rangeland and Pastoralism so far, and hopefully it will not be derailed by the present intentions. And another much smaller, much more modest project is a MOOC, so a massive open online course being organized by the International Institute for Environment and Development, a UK-based research institute with a long history on the side of agroecology and other things in the context of development, and that will start at the end of January. So if you visit the page of IIED, if you're interested, and search for IID, pastoralism, and MOOC, you will land onto it and find out how to get there. It's a 3-week course, free. And finally, I have to say that for those who are interested in Ilse's book, there is a chance to grab it, signed by the author, at the Chelsea Green stand downstairs as you go out, and Ilse will be there to sign it for you. I think we can move on to the question time. So over to you. Yes.
A lot of questions.
Do you have the time?
Yeah. Thank you very much. That was very interesting. I've just come back from India, actually, and on my phone right beside me here I have lots and lots of photographs of pastoralists. But my question is about your shepherdess. I missed your name earlier on. I'm sort of really put out by what you say about the EU, that there's something that says you must start off at 500 sheep, and I'm just really wondering if there's anything any of us with a pen in our hands can do to write to MEPs or European members of Parliament to try to do something about this. I don't know enough to argue your case, but it seems to me that this is something that something needs to be done about. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, of course. Like, as I said, like the common agricultural policy, it's very broad as all the European policies, and every member state has the power and the obligation to adapt it to the context. And it's responsibility of every member state to fix some things, and this number, I think, belongs to the competence of the member state. A lack of understanding. Sorry.
It'd be completely wrong that it comes from a lack of understanding of the whole pastoral way of life. You can understand that, and you know that they really are making regulations that are affecting all of your lives, but actually they don't fully understand the impact of. I think it's not the only regulation that happens with, but still, if we had a greater understanding of what to ask for that could help, perhaps many of us in this room maybe would like to try to do something to improve matters.
I mean, for all, I think articulation and coordination between the interested actors is fundamental, no? And then coordinate to show to those making the rules, like, hey, no, like, we need something else and we need your support, but in a different direction, no? So, I don't know if I'm understanding well your question. Okay.
Hi. I really agree with the comments that you made about regenerative farming and pastoralism needing to join up. I work in the regenerative agriculture field with livestock. One of the big issues that we deal with is the prophylactic treatments of intestinal parasites and how that breaks the ecosystem processes by killing soil life.
And this one?
To you.
I don't understand the question.
I am also struggling.
Can you understand?
It's very muddled. I didn't get it.
We can't understand the question.
It comes
I'm
very
sorry.
muddled here. Sorry.
Oh, is that my fault or is that the sound?
Maybe a bit
No,
better.
it's not your fault. It's the microphone. Maybe.
So, my question is about prophylactic treatments for intestinal parasites. Can you understand?
Prophylactic.
What?
Prophylactic treatments for intestinal.
Dewormers.
For intestinal worms. Oh. Prophylactic treatment for intestinal worms. So, I mean, you have to keep moving so that the sheep don't...
My question is, do you use them in your systems?
Yeah.
Do you use them?
Do what?
If you use them in your system, prophylactic.
So we're not using any, I mean, we're not dealing with, we're like camel people, so we're not dealing with sheep prophylaxis, but the pastors also have created certain breeds of sheep which are very highly resistant to worms, like there's the red Maasai sheep from Kenya, and actually that came to the notice of scientists that it was very resistant to internal parasites, and the response was I mean, to try to identify that gene that was responsible for it and then take that gene and implant, also put it into the Australian sheep because they were calculating how much money they could save by not having to buy dewormers. So I can't give you practical information on deworming of sheep. I know that...
Well, it wasn't sheep particularly, it's just generally.
General.
How do you deal with intestinal parasites? Do you use treatments? How do you deal with that? How do you get around it?
Okay. In my case, I only did, with goats and sheep, and we just treated them with, how do you call it? With earth when they had them. That was it. Like, I haven't learned the proper veterinary or the conventional, so to say, treatments. I just learned from some shepherds, and one of them...
Turmeric, there are also certain plants, I think, which...
2 years ago in La Montaña Palentina, we had the great pleasure to learn from a French young shepherd, and he used only essential oils and like basic stuff, plants that we had around, this kind of things.
But actually in our Rajasthan with the pastoralists, they mostly have traditional knowledge. They using turmeric and also some oil for deworming. And also in every village we have old people, they know about treatment. So actually they're learning from the generation to generation. So we have one lady also that's healer. She's doing everything like for camels or sheep and goat and other animals also. So most of our pastoralists, they are like shepherds. They're not going to the doctor. They have own treatment or own traditional knowledge.
I believe there might be some question from online.
Is my mic on? Yes, great. This is a question from the online audience from Bill Grayson. How much of a problem is this question of land use change likely to be for pastoralists in India and Spain? Are there other interests seeking to take over the traditional lands, for example, for protected nature conservation or tree planting, etc.?
I really struggle to hear what she says, I'm afraid. The speakers point that way, so...
Okay, I can say it again. How much of a problem is the question of land use change likely to be for pastoralists in India and Spain? Are there other interests seeking to take over the traditional lands for other purposes?
Okay. Yes. Yeah? That's a big question, yeah. Exactly. I mean, it's getting more and more difficult for pastors to move around because, the land is used. I mean, a lot of it goes for nature conservation. That's one thing. Then there's construction. I mean, there's also population pressure. Things get built up, and people now, in India, we have the issue of that the cows are very highly protected. They can't be slaughtered. So there are lots of, huge numbers of cows are wandering around the landscape, and they are destroying the crops of the farmers. So in response, the farmers are also trying to, they're enclosing their areas, which earlier were open. When I started work in Rajasthan, I mean, you couldn't see a fence anywhere, and now everything's starting to get fenced. So, and also energy projects are a big thing. Solar, a lot of the in the western desert of Rajasthan, which used to be really good camel grazing areas, it's now, there's solar panels cover huge areas, windmills are everywhere, so it's eaten up by energy projects, really. Yeah, so it's a big problem. Yeah. But I think in Spain the situation is somewhat better because you protect your ancestral cañadas and so on.
The cañadas, yes, but it's not always there. Like people owning the land around the cañadas, for example, had built fences that went into the cañada, so sometimes you can't go through it. And also, for example, in other parts, big companies are buying the land to set, for example, solar panels or these renewable energy settings, which in principle you say, okay, it's okay, it's good, or we could combine maybe the solar panels with livestock grazing underwear. But the thing is, if me as a young person want to have a piece of land, for example, and there is this big competition between the companies that pay whatever for it, then I'm out of the picture. And the other thing in Spain, we did a research for my bachelor thesis, and it showed that closer to the urban areas, there is a urban sprawl that is getting more and more, and then more in the rural areas, it's the opposite, but it's like the shrubs are growing since a couple of decades, so it's also a bit difficult to start because it's too thick already now. You need to do a great job to clear out a little bit to gain some pasture for your animals. No? And of course, in Spain, it's also this debate about land sharing or land sparing, they call it. No? Shall we share the land and preserve the natural resources while using them sustainably, or shall we protect 30% of the surface, and that's like God, and you can't touch it, and then you can intensify somewhere else? Well, I think we have seen that this is not really doable. So we should better work on this land sharing, and it's a big, big issue. No? This rewilding movement that is arising. Okay, we want wolves, or we want tigers, or these carnivores in Europe, for example, but how shall we do it to let everyone live together? No? So there are a lot of issues about land use change.
Actually, in India, mostly in Rajasthan, we have 3-4 type of the land. One is like pasture land, is from Maharaja's time they allotted to the people for the cow. And secondly, we have revenue land. Third, we have private land. And fourth, we have forest land. So now it's totally changes. Now our pasture land, government give for schools or development, some factories or something like that. And also in forest, they also totally change of the policy. They are not asking to the pastoralists about biodiversity, how they live without animal to wildlife. But they are not asking, and they make, sometimes they said, oh, make national park, sometimes they said, oh, we bring tiger, but it's not, we need some land for the pastoralists. And pastoralists, they are not like farm system. If government of India, they make some policy, they call farmer policies. We are not farmer, we are pastoralists. So we need recognition from the government. Now is 30 years we fight for that. Now is government recognize little bit of the name of the pastoralists. Otherwise they thinking they make policy only farmer. Farmer means pastoralists also include there. But we are not farming. We are nomadic people, we are pastoralist people. So we have a big problem of that.
Yeah, can I add something to that? I mean, the anti-livestock people, they always say, you know, if we stop keeping livestock, so much will be freed of land and available for nature conservation. But the thing is, livestock it can share the land with a lot of other activities. It isn't there permanently. It moves through. So it can share the land with wildlife, with farmers. It's a totally different concept to think that so much land is taken up by livestock.
Yeah, it's very intriguing. I've always been puzzled by this because, of course, the common sense is that farming is a permanent use of the land, and pastoralism is not, and therefore it's invisible to legislations or to a framework that focuses on permanent and stable use. But actually, farming is not so permanent either. And especially in Africa, farming is a 3 months operation over a year. And whilst pastoralism is active all year round, although in different parts of the land. So somehow that's always quite intriguing. And of course it can be shared, and it has been shared for a very long time, until someone started to think that the 3 months, because it meant building a hut or something, had to be somehow rewarded by permanent access, and ignored intermittent access and not always in the same place, which is the kind of use that pastoralist has. Is there something else from online or someone else from the public? Oh, maybe a gentleman up there.
I will speak as clearly as I can. First of all, I've been fortunate enough to read Ilse's book, and I thoroughly recommend it. It is completely eye-opening. Me, as a cynical old farmer, have learned a huge amount, and it's a very, very important piece of work, and it broadens and opens out the whole question about our relationship, not only with the land, but with the meat that we eat. So having done the puff for Ilse, the question is, in the book, your book, you talk about the demonizing of pastoralism, and in the sense that, and I've seen this in East Africa, that the denudation of the land is blamed on pastoralists, on overstocking of goats and sheep. And just a few days ago, I was in a debate with an academic about blaming pastoralists for essentially destroying the landscape of the Sinai, which then created a whole new eco-climate, which is why the whole of the Horn of Africa is in the mess that it's in. And in the book, you give the lie to this, and I wondered whether you could just explain why pastoralism is so important, in fact, in stabilizing the most fragile parts of the world in which pastoralists have their animals.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally true. If you keep livestock in one place and you don't let them move, or you keep them in a restricted place and you feed them additional feed, then, I mean, they will overgraze, absolutely. But pastoralists, basically, they mimic the movements that animals also had in the wild. So they're here in one place, and then they move, and they only come back after another year. And in that case, they definitely do not overgraze or destroy the vegetation. But that's exactly the important point. It's the continuous movement is necessary. And so we need to make sure these pastoralists will be able to move, or we're kind of cutting off the branch that we sit on if we don't make sure that there are places for them in the landscape. Yes, pastoralists are causing overgrazing. I think in Algeria, places, in many places where they get additional feed, So by that, you strengthen the grazing pressure, whereas in India, they don't do that. They never do. So the animal numbers actually automatically adapt to the available vegetation, and it's a characteristic of arid environments, not just that there is low precipitation, but there's also enormous fluctuation between different years. So you have one year where there is a drought or something like that, so then the livestock numbers adapt. I mean, they don't become pregnant, or more of the old animals die, and so it reduces itself, and then maybe the next year there's an enormous amount of rainfall. It can happen every few years, and then there is not actually enough animals to eat up all the vegetation. So, you know, the livestock numbers, unless you give them additional feed, they kind of just always fluctuate. This is a basic principle.
I would like to add to what Ilse is saying, that, for example, it has to do really with the differentiation between intensive livestock and extensive livestock systems. And we need to inform consumers about this. You mentioned the meat we eat. Yeah, it's not the same, the meat that is raised in an intensive system, that the one is raised in a pastoralist or extensive livestock system, no? And for example, in Spain, the platform for extensive livestock and pastoralism is trying to make it clear for policy makers, no? This is one thing and this is the other thing. And we need to promote the one that is sustainable and that is promoting the conservation of landscape and the rural, the state of the rural population and so on, no? So make this distinction.
Is there another question from the online audience?
No.
Not really.
Hi. So this is a question from Augusta, from our online audience. Do you think that through pastoralism it is possible to inspire a movement for a planet-based diet instead of a plant-based diet? What would you like to see happen both locally and globally to help shed light on the beauty of pastoralism across the globe?
Plant-based diet.
Topic of the day. Well, I think we need to reduce the meat consumption. It's obviously because we are eating mostly from these industrialized systems that are not sustainable, right? But then if we want to still eat meat, the extensive systems are, slow food, so to say. So we need to change our patterns of diet, and I think that's the most difficult sometimes, because what people do, what people eat, what people buy, it's something that, it's difficult to change. It needs generations and education and spreading the word, what we are doing here, discussing, so on. So I think it will take time, but we are on the way.
I mean, it's not just about, changing our dietary patterns. I think that's also important, but we need the right kind of policies. We need a ceiling to the number of animals has to be adjusted to the amount of land and vegetation that is available. I mean, that's the basic point. And then we will produce less meat, and it will be more expensive, I know.
Ecological or...
It would be more expensive when you buy it, but probably less expensive on a planetary scale.
No, absolutely not, There are also some scientists are saying that we do not have enough animals at the moment, because we lost the ecological balance because we've had such a huge loss of wildlife. So we don't have enough animals in the landscape, at least, and that this is causing all kinds of that is contributing to climate change. It's the lack of megafauna. That's a major factor. I'm looking into that hypothesis, Okay.
Too many animals in certain areas and not enough in others. It's an issue of distribution again. Yeah, yeah. And more questions? Yeah?
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah.
Hello. I wondered, is the meat and dairy that is produced, does it go into general markets, or is it identified as being from a pastoral system? Can people choose?
I believe your milk, no? The dairy that you produce, is it going to general market or special?
What the market? Yeah. For the milk? So, for the camel milk, yeah? Are you asking that? Or?
For the meat and the milk, yeah. Is there a premium? Because of pastoralism.
What is there a
Premium.
Oh. Yeah, well,
So if we're talking of, I mean, the camel milk that we market, it goes mostly for people with health problems, people with autoimmune diseases, autistic children, people with diabetes, people with cancer, and not for regular consumption. So it's, because we ship it all over India, it's, we put it into small bottles, and then we deep freeze it and we send it in thermocol boxes all over India. So it demands a premium. Yeah, it's not as expensive as camel milk in the UK, but by Indian standards, it's quite expensive. So.
Lady, we didn't have the hand up before, but then now it's down.
But there is no differentiation. I mean, between actually, this I might mention this, that in India we've done calculations to show that more than 50% of the milk in India, and India is the largest milk producer in the world, 50% of that is produced in a pastoralist system or by livestock that is kept on common property resources. So but there's no, I mean, there's no special costs for pastoralist milk or so. It just goes all in the general pool. Yeah.
One more.
Sabine from Germany has a question for Zuriñe. What factors and measures would help young pastoralists to improve their working conditions, and how can they be better supported?
How can they what?
Be supported.
Supported.
Yeah.
Not putting things on the way. No, I mean,
reducing the obstacles.
reducing the obstacles, yes.
Bureaucratic obstacles, financial obstacles.
Yeah, bureaucracy is a big, big, big issue, at least in Europe, in Spain. And yeah, like if you spend time with your animals and on the fields, you don't have time to do so many bureaucratic stuff, for example, or applying for projects. No, you might be, you might want to do an innovative project combining education with farming, for example, but that's something that takes time and you need to apply for fundings or whatever. So yeah, bureaucracy is a thing. Access to land, as I said, no, there is a lot of land abandonment in Europe, but it's not accessible either because the owners don't want to rent it for shepherds. They prefer to sell it for building touristic infrastructure or whatever, or simply because they don't trust you. In Spain, it happens, like you go to a village and it takes long to establish a trust relationship with the people. And I understand it, but it's also sometimes a bit difficult, no? What else? Support? Yeah, well, visibility and saying, yeah, this is a possible and needed way of living, and we need, of course, we need profitability. If it's not profitable, then who is going to dedicate to it, no? And yeah, I think those are the basics.
Thank you. I think this probably was the last answer. I think it's very appropriate to end with a few words from you, actually, who will be here when we will not anymore. And thank you very much for coming to the Humanities Herd Inherited session.